He walked into the bank carrying his sleeping little girl on his shoulder, looking like a man who hadn't eaten properly in weeks. "I just want to see my balance," he whispered to the teller. What happened next left the entire VIP room speechless, and the millionaire manager almost dropped her coffee. The glass doors of Grand Crest Bank swung open, and Evan Carter stepped inside, carrying his 3-year-old daughter asleep against his shoulder. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes hollow from months of exhaustion. Around him, men in tailored suits moved with the confidence of people who had never missed a meal. Evan approached the VIP counter, his hand trembling as he pulled out a worn bank card, the only thing his wife left behind before she died. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I just want to see my balance." No one knew what that card contained, not even him. Evan had not slept more than 4 hours in a single night for 2 months. His daughter, Lucy, woke at unpredictable hours, crying for her mother. He would hold her in the dark, whispering that everything would be okay, even though he did not believe it himself. The rent was 3 weeks overdue. The refrigerator held a carton of milk, 2 eggs, and half a loaf of bread. He had learned to skip lunch so Lucy could have dinner. Before the illness took her, his wife Sarah had worked as a medical assistant at a clinic downtown. Evan had been a freight coordinator at a shipping company, but after Sarah's diagnosis, he quit to care for her. The bills piled up faster than he could count. Insurance covered some of it. The rest became debt that followed him like a shadow. Sarah died on a Tuesday morning. The hospice nurse had left an hour earlier. Evan sat beside the bed holding her hand, and Lucy slept in the next room. Sarah's voice was so faint he had to lean close to hear her. "Keep the card," she whispered, her fingers curling weakly around his. "Don't lose it. Promise me." He promised. He did not ask why. There was no time left for questions. After the funeral, Evan found the card in Sarah's jewelry box, tucked inside a small envelope with his name written on the front. It was a plain bank card, scratched and faded, with the logo of Grand Crest Bank embossed in silver. He had never seen it before. He turned it over in his hands, confused. But he kept it. He put it in his wallet and did not think about it again. 2 months later, he was standing in the cramped kitchen of their apartment, staring at an eviction notice taped to the door. Lucy sat on the floor nearby, playing with a stuffed rabbit that had lost one of its ears. Evan's hands shook as he read the letter. He had 5 days to pay, or they would lose the apartment. That night, after Lucy fell asleep, he emptied his wallet onto the kitchen table. $362, a grocery receipt, a photo of Sarah, and the card. He picked it up and stared at it. He had no idea if there was anything on it. Sarah had been sick for so long, drowning in medical expenses. There was no reason to think she had saved money. But she had told him to keep it. She had made him promise. The next morning, he dressed Lucy in the cleanest clothes she had and carried her on his shoulder. She was small for 3 years old, light enough that he barely noticed the weight anymore. He took the bus downtown, counting stops, watching the city grow taller and shinier through the window. By the time they reached the financial district, Lucy had fallen asleep against his neck. Grand Crest Bank stood on the corner of 5th and Maple, a building of glass and steel that reflected the sky. Evan had walked past it before, but never gone inside. It was the kind of place where people wore watches that cost more than his monthly rent. He hesitated at the entrance, his reflection staring back at him from the polished glass. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes were scuffed. Lucy's hair was tangled because he had forgotten to brush it that morning. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The lobby was enormous, with marble floors and a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. A woman in a navy suit passed him without a glance, heels clicking sharply against the stone. No one looked at Evan. No one looked at Lucy asleep on his shoulder. He walked to the main counter where a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes glanced up from her computer. Her name tag read, Elena. "Good morning," Elena said warmly. "How can I help you?" Evan shifted Lucy's weight on his shoulder and pulled the card from his pocket. He set it on the counter, his hands still trembling slightly. I need to check the balance on this, Evan said quietly. Elena picked up the card and swiped it through the machine. She frowned, then swiped it again. The screen blinked but did not respond. Hold on just a moment, Elena said. She typed something into her computer, then tilted her head, her frown deepening. This card is flagged for internal access only. I'll need to take you to the VIP services area. Evan blinked. VIP? Elena smiled gently. It's just a different system. Follow me. She led him through a set of frosted glass doors into a quieter section of the bank. The walls were lined with dark wood, and the furniture looked like it cost more than everything Evan owned. A few clients sat in leather chairs, speaking in low voices to consultants in expensive suits. Elena gestured toward a desk near the back. Wait here. I'll get someone to help you. Evan sat down carefully, adjusting Lucy so she could rest more comfortably. He glanced around, feeling the weight of eyes on him. A man in a pinstriped suit glanced over, then looked away with barely concealed disdain. Then the door to a private office opened, and a woman stepped out. She was younger than Evan expected, maybe in her early 30s, with sharp features and hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. She wore a black blazer and heels that made her footsteps sound like a judge's gavel. Her eyes swept over Evan, taking in his wrinkled shirt, his sleeping daughter, the exhaustion written across his face. Her expression did not change, but something cold flickered in her gaze. Elena approached her and spoke quietly, handing over the card. The woman glanced at it, then at Evan, and her lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. She walked over, her heels sharp against the floor. I'm Victoria Hale, Senior Account Manager. Elena tells me you need help with this card. Evan nodded. I just want to check the balance. Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly. You don't know the balance? No, Evan admitted. My wife left it for me before she passed. I've never used it. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but there was a faint trace of amusement in her eyes, the kind people wear when they think they already know the punchline. She took the card from Elena and returned to her desk. Evan followed, still holding Lucy. Victoria sat down and gestured for Evan to sit across from her. He did carefully, as if the chair might break under him. She inserted the card into her terminal and began typing. So, Victoria said without looking up, you've been carrying around a card for 2 months and never once thought to check what was on it. Evan's jaw tightened. I didn't think there was anything on it. Victoria's fingers flew across the keyboard. Then why come in now? Evan's voice was quiet. Because I'm out of options. Victoria glanced up at him, her eyes cool and assessing. I see. She returned her attention to the screen. The system took longer than usual to load, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Evan watched her face, trying to read her expression, but she gave nothing away. Then the screen changed. Victoria froze. Her fingers stopped moving. Her eyes widened just slightly, and the color drained from her face. She leaned forward, staring at the monitor as if it had shown her something impossible. Evan's heart began to pound. What is it? Victoria did not answer. She blinked, then looked at the screen again, as if expecting the numbers to change. Her hand moved to the mouse, clicking through several tabs, her movements faster now, almost frantic. Elena, standing nearby, noticed the shift. Miss Hale, is everything okay? Victoria's voice came out strained, barely controlled. Get Mr. Phillips. Elena hesitated. Mr. Phillips is in a meeting now. Victoria snapped. Now! Elena hurried away. Evan leaned forward, his pulse racing. What's wrong? Is there a problem with the card? Victoria finally looked at him, and for the first time since he had entered the bank, there was no condescension in her eyes, only shock and something else, fear. Mr. Carter, Victoria said slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. When was the last time you spoke to your wife about her finances? Evan's throat tightened. She never talked about money. We were barely scraping by. I don't understand. Victoria turned the monitor toward him. Evans stared at the screen. At first, the numbers did not make sense. They were too large, arranged in a way that seemed impossible. He blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. The balance read $78,423,650. Evans' breath caught. His vision blurred. He gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "That can't be right," he whispered. Victoria's voice was flat. "The system doesn't make mistakes like this." Evans shook his head, his mind spinning. "There's no way. Sarah worked at a clinic. We had nothing. We couldn't even afford her treatment. Then where did this come from?" Victoria demanded, her composure cracking. "Because according to our records, this account has been active for 3 years, and the deposits were made in regular amounts from a private medical trust." Evan's hands were shaking. Lucy stirred on his shoulder, her small hand clutching his shirt. He held her tighter, as if she were the only real thing left in the world. "I don't know," he said hoarsely. "I don't know anything about this." Victoria stared at him, her expression unreadable. Around them, the VIP lounge had gone silent. Other clients had noticed the commotion, their conversations dying as they turned to watch. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming once against the armrest. Her voice dropped to a murmur, almost to herself. $78 million, she said quietly. And he didn't even know. Evan looked down at Lucy, her face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the storm unfolding around them. His mind raced, trying to understand. Sarah had never mentioned money. She had never mentioned anything. But she had told him to keep the card. She had made him promise. And now, sitting in this cold, glittering bank, Evan realized that his life had just changed in a way he could not control, in a way he did not understand, and he had no idea what came next. Evan could not move. The number on the screen stared back at him, cold and impossible. $78,423,650. He read it again, slower this time, as if reading it differently might change what it said. It did not. Lucy shifted against his shoulder, her breath warm on his neck. He adjusted his grip on her automatically, his body moving while his mind stayed frozen. Victoria was watching him with an expression he could not decipher, suspicion, maybe, or disbelief. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers laced together on the desk. "Mr. Carter," Victoria said carefully, "I need you to be very honest with me right now. Do you have any idea where this money came from?" Evan shook his head. His voice came out rough. "No. I told you. Sarah never said anything about this." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Your wife worked at a medical clinic. You were a freight coordinator. Neither of those jobs would generate this kind of wealth." "I know that," Evan said, his frustration breaking through. "I know it doesn't make sense, but I'm telling you the truth. I didn't even know this account existed until today." Victoria studied him for a long moment, her jaw tight. Then she turned back to her computer and began typing rapidly. Her eyes scanned the screen, moving quickly from one section to another. Behind them, the other clients in the VIP lounge were no longer pretending not to watch. A man in a gray suit leaned over to whisper something to the woman beside him. Another client pulled out his phone, glancing between Evan and the screen in his hand. Evan felt the weight of their stares. He had walked into this bank hoping for maybe a few hundred, enough to buy groceries and keep the lights on for another month. Now he sat at the center of something he did not understand, surrounded by people who thought he was either a liar or a fool. Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. "The account was opened 3 years ago. The deposits started 6 months after that. They came in regular amounts, always from the same source, a private medical trust called the Harmon Family Foundation." Evan frowned. "I've never heard of that." Victoria's fingers kept moving across the keyboard. "The foundation is a charitable trust established by the Harmon family in 2008. They fund medical research and provide compensation for bone marrow and organ donors." She looked up at him, her expression sharp. "Does that mean anything to you?" Evan's mind raced. Sarah had never mentioned donating anything. She had been healthy until the cancer, and even then, she had been too sick to think about anyone but Lucy. He tried to remember if she had ever talked about a medical procedure, a donation, anything that might explain this. Nothing, he said. I don't know, Evan said quietly. She never told me about any of this. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. She clicked through several more screens, then stopped. Her eyes widened slightly, and she sat back in her chair. What? Evan asked, his heart pounding. What is it? Victoria did not answer immediately. She stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Evan, and for the first time, the coldness in her eyes softened just slightly. Your wife donated bone marrow, Victoria said quietly. 4 years ago. The recipient was a child, the Harmon family's son. Evan felt the air leave his lungs. What? Victoria turned the monitor toward him again. The screen showed a scanned document, old and slightly faded, with Sarah's signature at the bottom. The date was 4 years earlier. Evan recognized her handwriting immediately, the way she looped her S, the careful way she dotted her I's. She didn't want you to know, Victoria said, her voice softer now. According to these records, she requested full anonymity. The donation was processed through a third-party medical service, and the trust was set up to compensate her after the procedure. She specified that the funds were to be held until her death, at which point they would transfer to you. Evan's hands were shaking. He sat Lucy down carefully in the chair beside him, afraid he might drop her. His vision blurred, and he pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to breathe. Sarah had done this. She had saved someone's life, and she had never said a word. Why wouldn't she tell me? Evan whispered, more to himself than to Victoria. Victoria's voice was quiet. Maybe she didn't want you to feel indebted. Or maybe she didn't want you to worry. Evan looked down at his hands. They were rough, callous from months of hauling boxes and scrubbing floors, doing whatever work he could find to keep Lucy fed. Sarah had been dying, drowning in medical bills. And the entire time, she had been sitting on a fortune that could have saved them both. But she had chosen not to touch it. She had chosen to leave it for him. Evan felt something twist in his chest, a mixture of grief and gratitude and anger he could not name. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. He wanted to ask her why, but she was gone, and he would never get an answer. Elena returned, followed by a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a suit that looked like it cost more than Evan's car. His name tag read, James Phillips, Senior Vice President. Phillips approached the desk, his expression calm but curious. Miss Hale, what seems to be the issue? Victoria stood and gestured toward the screen. Phillips leaned over, his eyes scanning the monitor. His eyebrows lifted, and he glanced at Evan, then back at the screen. I see, Phillips said slowly. He straightened and extended a hand toward Evan. Mr. Carter, I'm James Phillips. I understand this has been a surprising morning for you. Evan shook his hand weakly. That's one word for it. Phillips nodded and took a seat beside Victoria. Before we proceed, I need to verify a few things. This account is legitimate, but given the circumstances, we need to ensure everything is in order. Miss Hale, pull up the trust documentation. Victoria's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. A new document appeared on the screen, dense with legal text. Phillips leaned forward, reading silently. Evan watched him, his stomach churning. After a long moment, Phillips sat back. Everything appears to be in order. The trust was established by the Harmon Family Foundation, and the beneficiary is listed as Sarah Carter, with instructions to transfer the full balance to Evan Carter upon her death. The death certificate was filed 2 months ago, which triggered the transfer protocol. Evan's throat tightened. So, it's real. Phillips nodded. It's real. Victoria's voice was tight. Mr. Phillips, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. The account has been dormant for years, and now it suddenly activates with a balance of $78 million. We need to conduct a full audit before. Phillips held up a hand. Miss Hale, I understand your concerns, but this is not a fraudulent account. The Harmon Family Foundation is one of the most reputable charitable organizations in the country. If they established this trust, it was done legally and with full transparency. Victoria's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Evan could see the conflict in her eyes. She had misjudged him, and now she was faced with the reality that he was not who she thought he was. Phillips turned to Evan, his expression kind. Mr. Carter, I know this is overwhelming. You're welcome to take some time to process this. We can schedule a follow-up appointment to discuss your options for managing the account. Evan stared at him. Options? Phillips nodded. You'll need to decide how you want to handle the funds, investments, trusts for your daughter, estate planning. We have advisors who can help you navigate all of this. Evan felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. He had come here looking for enough money to pay rent. Now he was being told he needed estate planning. He did not know what half of those words meant. I don't know anything about investments, Evan said, his voice cracking. I just wanted to make sure Lucy had food. Phillips's expression softened. I understand. And we'll help you. But first, you need to take a breath. This money is yours. It's not going anywhere. Evan looked down at Lucy, still asleep in the chair beside him. Her small hand clutched the edge of his shirt, her face peaceful and unaware. He thought about the eviction notice taped to their door, the empty refrigerator, the nights he had lain awake wondering how he would survive another week. And now, in the span of 20 minutes, everything had changed. But it did not feel like relief. It felt like drowning. Victoria excused herself and stepped away from the desk. Evan watched her go, then turned back to Phillips. What happens now? Evan asked quietly. Phillips folded his hands on the desk. Now we verify your identity, complete the transfer paperwork, and set up access to the account. It's a straightforward process, but it will take a few hours. Evan nodded slowly. Lucy stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around, confused, then reached for him. He lifted her into his lap, and she buried her face against his chest. Daddy, I'm hungry, Lucy whispered. Evan's heart clenched. I know, sweetheart. We'll get you something soon. Phillips smiled gently. There's a cafe on the first floor. Why don't you take your daughter and get something to eat? Come back in an hour, and we'll have everything ready for you. Evan hesitated. He did not want to leave. He was afraid that if he walked away, the whole thing would disappear, like waking from a dream. But Lucy was hungry, and he could not ignore that. Okay, Evan said. He stood, lifting Lucy onto his hip. I'll be back. Phillips nodded. Take your time. Evan carried Lucy toward the exit. As he passed through the VIP lounge, he felt eyes on him again, but this time the stares felt different, less judgmental, more curious. He pushed through the frosted glass doors and made his way to the elevator. The ride down was silent except for Lucy's soft breathing. When the doors opened, he stepped out into the main lobby and followed the signs to the cafe. The cafe was small and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the street. Evan ordered a muffin and a carton of milk for Lucy and a black coffee for himself. He paid with the last few dollars in his wallet, then carried the tray to a table in the corner. Lucy ate slowly, her small hands tearing the muffin into pieces. Evan watched her, his mind spinning. He thought about Sarah, lying in that hospital bed, telling him to keep the card. He thought about the nights she had stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, her face pale and drawn. He had thought she was thinking about death. But maybe she had been thinking about this, about him, about Lucy. She had fought for them even when she knew she would not be there to see it. Evan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He blinked them away quickly, not wanting Lucy to see. But the weight of it was too much, the grief, the guilt, the overwhelming sense that he did not deserve this. Sarah had given everything, and he hadn't even known. Lucy looked up at him, her face smeared with crumbs. Daddy, why are you sad? Evan forced a smile. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about Mommy. Lucy's face brightened. Mommy's in heaven. Evan nodded. Yeah, she is. Lucy reached out and patted his hand with her small, sticky fingers. It's okay, Daddy. Mommy said you're really strong. Evan's throat tightened. He pulled Lucy into his arms and held her close, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like milk and sugar and something faintly floral, a scent that reminded him of Sarah. I love you, Lucy, Evan whispered. I love you too, Daddy, Lucy said, her voice muffled against his chest. They sat there for a long time, holding each other in the corner of the cafe while the world moved on around them. When they returned to the VIP lounge, Elena was waiting for them. She smiled warmly and gestured toward Victoria's office. Miss Hale and Mr. Phillips are ready for you, Elena said. Evan nodded and carried Lucy back through the frosted glass doors. Victoria and Phillips were both seated at the desk, a stack of papers spread out in front of them. Victoria's expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in her shoulders that had not been there before. Phillips stood and gestured for Evan to sit. Mr. Carter, we've completed the verification process. Everything is in order. All we need now is your signature on a few documents, and the account will be fully transferred to your name. Evan sat down slowly, Lucy perched on his knee. He stared at the papers in front of him, the words blurring together: transfer of assets, beneficiary designation, estate authorization. He could not breathe. I don't know if I can do this, Evan said quietly. Phillips frowned. What do you mean? Evan's hands were shaking. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with $78 million. I can't. His voice broke. I can't be that person. Victoria's eyes flickered with something he could not name. She leaned forward, her voice careful. Mr. Carter, this money is yours. Your wife wanted you to have it. But I didn't earn it, Evan said, his voice rising. She did. She's the one who saved that kid's life. She's the one who went through the procedure. I didn't do anything. I was just... He stopped, his throat closing. I was just there. Lucy looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion. Daddy? Evan pulled her closer, his chest heaving. He felt like he was falling, like the ground had disappeared beneath him, and there was nothing left to hold on to. Victoria stood and walked around the desk. She knelt down in front of Evan, her eyes level with his. For the first time since he had met her, there was no coldness in her gaze, only something raw and honest. Mr. Carter, Victoria said quietly, your wife didn't leave this money for you because you earned it. She left it because she loved you. Because she wanted to make sure you and your daughter would be okay after she was gone. Victoria's voice softened. That's not something you have to deserve. That's just love. Evan stared at her, his vision blurred with tears. Lucy wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him tight. I miss her, Evan whispered. Victoria's expression cracked just slightly. I know. Evan closed his eyes and let the tears fall. He held Lucy against his chest and let himself break, just for a moment, in the middle of that cold, glittering bank. And when he finally opened his eyes again, Victoria was still there, kneeling in front of him, her hand resting gently on his arm. You don't have to do this alone, Victoria said softly. Let us help you. Evan looked down at Lucy, her small face pressed against his shoulder. He thought about the eviction notice, the empty refrigerator, the nights he had lain awake, terrified that he would fail her. And then he thought about Sarah lying in that hospital bed, squeezing his hand one last time. Keep the card. Don't lose it. She had fought for them even when she had nothing left. She had fought. And now it was his turn. Evan wiped his eyes and looked at Victoria. Okay, he said quietly. Help me. Victoria stood and returned to her seat across from Evan. She pulled a notepad from her desk drawer and clicked a pen, her movements precise and controlled. Phillips folded his hands on the desk, watching Evan with quiet patience. First things first, Victoria said, her voice steady now, professional. We need to address your immediate needs. You mentioned an eviction notice. Evan nodded, his throat still tight. I have 5 days, maybe less by now. Victoria wrote something on the notepad. How much do you owe? $3,200. Evan said the number felt absurd now, saying it out loud in a room where millions of dollars sat on a computer screen. Victoria did not react. We can wire that today. What else? Evan looked down at Lucy, who was playing with the button on his shirt, humming softly to herself. I need to buy groceries, pay the electric bill, maybe fix the heater before winter. Victoria kept writing. We'll set up a checking account for your daily expenses. I'd recommend starting with $50,000. That should cover your immediate costs and give you breathing room while we sort out the rest. Evan's head spun. $50,000. He had never seen that much money in his life. And she was talking about it like it was pocket change. What about the rest? Evan asked quietly. Victoria set down her pen and looked at him directly. The rest needs to be handled carefully. $78 million is not something you can just spend. You need investments, legal protection, tax planning. If you're not careful, you could lose it all in a few years. Evan felt the weight of her words settle on his chest. I don't know how to do any of that. That's why we're here. Phillips interjected gently. We have financial advisors who specialize in wealth management. They can help you create a plan that protects your assets and ensures your daughter's future is secure. Evan looked at Lucy, her small hands still clutching his shirt. He thought about Sarah lying in that hospital bed holding his hand. She had done this for Lucy. She had made sure that no matter what happened, their daughter would be safe. Okay, Evan said. What do I need to do? Victoria pulled a folder from her desk and opened it. We'll start by setting up a trust for Lucy. That way, her education and living expenses are covered no matter what. Then we'll look at low-risk investments, bonds, index funds, real estate, nothing aggressive. The goal is stability, not quick returns. Evan nodded, trying to follow along. The words felt foreign, like a language he had never learned. Victoria continued, her tone measured. You'll also need a financial advisor and an attorney. I can recommend several, but ultimately the choice is yours. This is your money, Mr. Carter. No one can tell you what to do with it. Evan felt a flicker of something in his chest, not relief exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. For the first time in months, he was not drowning. He was standing on solid ground, and someone was offering him a map. Thank you, Evan said quietly. Victoria's expression softened just slightly. You're welcome. Phillips leaned forward, his voice kind. Mr. Carter, I know this is overwhelming, but you're doing the right thing by asking for help. A lot of people in your position would try to handle it alone, and that's when things go wrong. Evan thought about the eviction notice, the empty refrigerator, the nights he had spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if he should just give up. He had been alone for so long, carrying everything by himself, that he had forgotten what it felt like to let someone else share the weight. I don't want to mess this up, Evan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucy deserves better than that. Phillips smiled. Then you're already ahead of most people. Victoria spent the next 2 hours walking Evan through the paperwork. She explained each document carefully, making sure he understood what he was signing. Phillips occasionally interjected with clarifications, his tone patient and reassuring. Elena brought them coffee and a cup of juice for Lucy, who had grown restless and was now coloring on the back of a blank form with a pen Victoria had given her. By the time they finished, the sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Evan's hand ached from signing his name so many times. But when Victoria finally closed the folder and slid it across the desk, he felt something loosen in his chest. It's done, Victoria said. The account is officially yours. The wire for your rent will go through within the hour, and your checking account will be active by tomorrow morning. Evan stared at the folder, unable to speak. It felt unreal, like he was watching someone else's life unfold in front of him. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Carter, can I ask you something? Evan looked up. Sure. Victoria's voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. When you walked in here this morning, what were you expecting? Evan thought about it for a moment. Honestly, I was expecting nothing. Maybe a few hundred if I was lucky. Enough to keep the lights on for another month. He looked down at Lucy, who was still scribbling on the paper. I just wanted to survive. Victoria nodded slowly. And now? Evan did not answer right away. He thought about Sarah, about the way she had held his hand in those final moments. He thought about the card she had left him, the secret she had kept to protect him. He thought about Lucy and the future that had just opened up in front of them. No, Evan said quietly. I think I have a chance to do more than survive. Victoria's expression shifted, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled, small, barely there, but real. Good, Victoria said. She stood and extended her hand. If you need anything, Mr. Carter, don't hesitate to call. We're here to help. Evan shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of her grip. Thank you, for everything. Victoria held his gaze for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement, maybe, or an apology. I'm sorry, Victoria said quietly. For earlier. I shouldn't have judged you. Evan shook his head. It's okay. I probably would have done the same thing. Victoria's smile faded, replaced by something more solemn. No, it's not okay. I see a lot of people walk through these doors, and I've gotten used to making assumptions. But that's not an excuse. She glanced at Lucy, then back at Evan. Your wife gave you something extraordinary. Not just the money, but the love behind it. I shouldn't have dismissed that. Evan felt his throat tighten again. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Philip stood as well, offering his hand. Take care of yourself, Mr. Carter, and take care of that little girl. Evan shook his hand. I will. Elena appeared at the doorway, holding a small envelope. She walked over and handed it to Evan. This is your new debit card. It'll be active tomorrow. And here's my card in case you have any questions. Evan took the envelope, his hand still trembling slightly. Thank you, Elena. You've been really kind. Elena smiled warmly. Good luck, Mr. Carter. You and Lucy are going to be just fine. Evan lifted Lucy into his arms, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, her small arms circling his neck. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, steady and strong. Ready to go home, sweetheart? Evan asked. Lucy nodded, her face bright. Can we get chicken nuggets? Evan laughed, the sound surprising even himself. Yeah, we can get chicken nuggets. Evan walked through the lobby of Grand Crest Bank with Lucy on his hip, the envelope clutched in his free hand. The marble floors gleamed under the afternoon light, and the chandelier above sparkled like something out of a dream. But this time he did not feel small. He did not feel out of place. He pushed through the glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The city stretched out before him, tall and indifferent, the way it always had. But something felt different now. The weight that had been pressing down on his chest for months was gone, replaced by something lighter, not happiness exactly, not yet, but hope. He walked to the bus stop and sat down on the bench, Lucy still in his arms. She rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes half closed, content. Evan looked down at the envelope in his hand. Inside was a small plastic card, plain and unremarkable. But it represented something more than money. It represented Sarah's love, her sacrifice, her belief that he could take care of their daughter even when he did not believe it himself. He thought about the last time he had seen her lying in that hospital bed, her hand cold in his. She had looked at him with so much trust, so much faith, that it had broken his heart. And now he understood. She had not been saying goodbye. She had been saying, I'll take care of you even when I'm gone. Evan pressed the envelope against his chest and closed his eyes. Thank you, Sarah, he whispered. I promise I won't let you down. Lucy stirred against him, her small voice sleepy. Daddy, are we going home? Evan opened his eyes and looked down at her. Yeah, sweetheart, we're going home. The bus pulled up a few minutes later, its brakes hissing as it came to a stop. Evan stood and carried Lucy on board, swiping his card at the reader. The driver nodded at him, and Evan made his way to a seat near the back. As the bus pulled away from the curb, Evan looked out the window at the city passing by, the buildings, the people, the noise. It was all the same as it had been this morning. But he was not. He thought about the future now, something he had not allowed himself to do in a long time. He thought about finding a better apartment, one with a yard where Lucy could play. He thought about enrolling her in a good school, one with art classes and field trips. He thought about taking her to the beach, maybe, or to see the mountains, places Sarah had always wanted to go but never had the chance. He thought about living instead of just surviving. The bus rumbled on, carrying them through the city, past the glittering towers and the crowded streets. And for the first time in a long time, Evan felt like he could breathe. Lucy was asleep by the time they reached their stop. Evan carried her off the bus and up the cracked sidewalk to their building. The paint was still peeling. The stairs still creaked. But when he unlocked the door and stepped inside, the apartment felt different, warmer somehow, like it was not just a place to hide anymore. He laid Lucy down on the couch and pulled a blanket over her. She curled up beneath it, her face peaceful, her small hand tucked under her cheek. Evan sat down beside her and watched her sleep, his chest tight with love and grief and gratitude all at once. He thought about Sarah, about the woman she had been, strong and kind and selfless. She had given him everything, even when she had nothing left to give. And now it was his job to honor that, to take care of their daughter, to build the life Sarah had dreamed of but would never see. Evan reached into his pocket and pulled out the old worn bank card. He turned it over in his hands, running his thumb across the scratched surface. It was just a piece of plastic, but it had changed everything. He stood and walked to the small table by the window. He opened the drawer and placed the card inside, next to the photo of Sarah he kept there. Her face smiled up at him, frozen in a moment of happiness he could barely remember now. But he held on to it the way he held on to everything she had left behind. "I love you," Evan whispered. "And I'm going to make you proud." He closed the drawer and turned back to Lucy, still asleep on the couch. The eviction notice was still taped to the door, but it did not matter anymore. Tomorrow, he would pay it. Tomorrow, he would start over. Tonight, he would just sit here in the quiet of their small apartment and hold on to the only thing that mattered, his daughter, and the memory of the woman who had saved them both. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in shades of gold and orange. And inside, Evan sat beside his daughter, watching her sleep, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay.